It's the day after a violent, rioting mob of Trump supporters breached the Capitol building, setting off a wave of resignations within the administration. It's also the day after Facebook and Twitter had finally seen enough and locked down President Trump's accounts. Despite the chaos, Tesla stock, well, it kept rising, turning Elon Musk into the richest person on Earth. I'm Mackenzie Sigalos, and this is CNBC After Hours. Stocks closed today's trading session at record highs. The Dow closed above 31,000 for the first time, and the Nasdaq Composite finished above 13,000 for the first time as well. But as we've said so many times before on the show over the past several months, do not let the stock market fool you. The business and tech communities, along with everybody else around the world, woke up this morning and tried to digest serious questions about the future of democracy, the two-party system here in American politics, and most immediately, what the next 13 days look like while Donald Trump is still commander-in-chief of this country's armed forces. Now, yesterday afternoon, the world watched a violent mob of Trump supporters storm the Capitol building while a joint session of Congress gathered to officially count the electoral votes in the 2020 election. A noose was erected on the grounds of the United States Capitol. Improvised explosive devices were found nearby. During the riot, President Trump posted a video to Twitter repeating conspiracy theories about a fraudulent election. Well, now it's the day after. The Capitol building has been secured, the streets cleared, Congress formally confirmed Joe Biden's election, and the stock market, unbelievably and also totally predictably to all of us who have been paying attention during this tragic pandemic, is at record highs. CNBC Washington correspondent Eamon Javers explained to us how the events unfolded yesterday and what questions still remain today.
All of this began around noon on Wednesday when the president went to the Ellipse just off of the National Mall to give a speech in which he said he would never concede the election and never give up his fight. He told that crowd that they should march to the Capitol. He said peacefully, but he said march to the Capitol, and the crowd took him literally at his word. We saw that crowd move from the Ellipse near the White House down Pennsylvania Avenue to the Capitol building, where at 1 p.m. the joint session of Congress was convening in order to count the Electoral College votes and make Biden and Harris's victory official. As soon as the crowd arrived, we saw them banging on the doors, smashing glass, trying to break into the Capitol, overrunning barricades. That happened just after the time when the first objections were raised in the joint session by pro-Trump members of Congress who were trying to block the count inside the joint session. We saw those people on the Senate floor and the House floor evacuated by police in a panicky moment as protesters were unrestrained inside the Capitol building. It wasn't until late Wednesday evening that Congress was able to secure the Capitol, bring the members back in, and reconvene the vote. They did that, continued with the debate for some hours, and soon after 3 a.m. on Thursday morning, Mike Pence, the sitting vice president, announced that it was in fact official. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris had been elected president and vice president of the United States. Moments after that, we got a statement from the social media director with a statement from President Trump saying that he would in fact support a peaceful transfer of power. Well, it's obvious there was a tactical and leadership failure by the Capitol Police. They didn't have the right people in place. They didn't have the right number of people in the right places. You can see in the video that the Capitol Police officers manning barricades, securing the perimeter of the facility, were simply overrun by a large number of protesters who were immediately violent, throwing punches, knocking over barricades, pushing Capitol Police officers back. A tragic series of events there, and there are going to be some questions now about why the Capitol Police wasn't in position to handle this national security incident. There's a lot of soul searching going on inside the White House right now. I've talked to a number of aides who are weighing decisions about whether or not to resign. We've seen a number who have already resigned in protest of the president's conduct yesterday, saying they simply can't continue to serve a man who would serve at the head of that group of supporters and behave the way we saw the president behaving yesterday. I think there are more resignations possible of higher level officials. And of course, there have been, we are told, lower level discussions inside the White House of using the 25th Amendment. That is the provision in the Constitution which allows for the removal of a president for inability or failure to complete his duties. That's a complicated process under the Constitution, unlikely at this point to move forward, but it's a fluid situation. Just the fact that those conversations have happened inside the White House staff is a striking thing at this moment in our democracy.
The response to yesterday's unprecedented events from the business community has been swift. Bank CEOs and tech leaders issued statements condemning the violence on Capitol Hill. In our Soundcheck today, we rounded up the reactions from some of corporate America's key stakeholders on CNBC's airwaves.
But what happened yesterday is a disgrace, and as an American, I'm embarrassed. You know, I didn't vote for Trump in 2016. I voted for him in this past election, November. Today, I'm sorry I did that.
We don't have to worry, I think, about national security. I think the national security apparatus will work well, but I do think we should take a longer-term perspective on how to make certain that we once again become a beacon for democracy around the world and not a laughingstock.
I call Pompeo. I'm the special envoy to Northern Ireland, and it's a small job. It's a part-time gig, but it's all I've got in the administration. I called Mike Pompeo last night, left him a note, told him that I'd be resigning from that. I can't do it. I can't stay. It's a nothing thing. It doesn't affect the outcome. It doesn't affect the transition, but it's what I've got, right? And it's a position I really enjoy doing, but you can't do it. And I wouldn't be surprised to see more of my friends resign over the course of the next 24 to 48 hours.
YouTube literally does not engage in the controversies. They're just as big a contributor. I mean, maybe not quite as big as Facebook because you can't organize an insurrection on YouTube, but in terms of spreading disinformation and hate, YouTube is horrible.
I think Section 230 needs to change, and I think that these social media companies need to be dealt with as publishers. And I think at the front of the line is Facebook, because they are algorithmically deciding. There are people inside of that company that are building these things that are amplifying the lobotomization, the intellectual cornering of people.
On that note about the role of big tech platforms in yesterday's violence, we finally learned what it would take for social media companies to boot President Trump from the platform. A violent mob of supporters breaching the Capitol building. As the world watched the chaos in Washington, D.C., Chris Sacca, a prominent tech investor who's been connected to companies like Twitter, Uber, Instagram, and Kickstarter, called out Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg, saying that they had blood on their hands. After lawmakers were evacuated and rioters had already stormed the chambers of the House and the Senate, and Trump had posted a pre-taped video repeating false accusations of election theft, Twitter and Facebook locked down his accounts. Trump's Twitter suspension expired this afternoon, 12 hours after he removed tweets the company said violated its civic integrity policy. But this morning, Zuckerberg said that Trump's ban from Facebook and Instagram would extend for at least the next 2 weeks until his term is officially over. Look, yesterday wasn't the first time the president posted something inaccurate or incendiary to his social media accounts. It's also not the first time his posts have been connected with violence. We asked the Wall Street Journal's senior personal tech columnist Joanna Stern to explain the role of social media in the violence and how it came to this: the President of the United States banned from Facebook.
I do not think it's possible to overstate the impact of social media and even, mobile technology in what happened yesterday. I watched those images, and within a few seconds, sure, I was watching them through social media, I was watching them through Twitter, but in them, you could just see what prompted this, or what allowed these people to congregate, to make these plans. And even the sole purpose that they were there for was based on misinformation or disinformation that had spread across the internet. The platforms over the last couple of years have consistently adjusted policies to really make way for Donald Trump to say what he can say. They've been trying to do this delicate balance of we allow the content up, but we don't allow it to be shared. In this case, they just said, we don't want it to be shared. We don't want people to see this. We just don't. The cost is too great. We've always known that Facebook and Twitter and other social media companies could take actions like this. The question has been around, do they want to? What was the implication of doing that, of limiting free speech? And also, what's the implication of doing that to the President of the United States? I think we can't underestimate in this situation the fact that we are going to have a different president in a couple of weeks. And so the platforms know this. Social media companies very quickly then saw how quickly this information was being spread by the president, or information was being spread by this gigantic account on their platforms. And they decided to protect it. They decided to protect, first of all, themselves, right? They don't want more of this information being spread there. So they're protecting themselves as a company. They're protecting its users. And then, of course, they're protecting world peace. I mean, that was actually what was on the table yesterday. They were protecting democracy and peace in this country. We've always known these companies have this power. In fact, this has been the debate or the clash between President Trump and the tech giants, right? They have been taken some liberties to restrict speech, restrict certain types of content. That's made President Trump and others, particularly on the conservative side, angry. And they've said, well, we need to take a look at this. We want these to be unbiased, very even platforms. And so that's what some of this legislation or regulation is all about. My biggest question now is this timeout that President Trump has been put into, the Twitter timeout, the Facebook timeout, he's not able to post on these, will that impact his actions? Is he really thinking now, I'm going to be out of office soon, I still need these millions of followers, I still need a place to get that message out? I think no doubt he's thinking about how else is he going to continue to get that message out. He's got other ways, he's got email and campaign lists, but Twitter is a big one. Twitter is a really big one for him. And, the timeout, it might work.
Okay, time for today's numbers round. In the midst of the violence in Washington, D.C., there are still some key business stories that we think should be on your radar. We'll start with $185 billion. Elon Musk has dethroned Jeff Bezos as the richest person in the world. The Tesla and SpaceX CEO now has a net worth surpassing $185 billion. Musk's wealth has ballooned this past year as the price of Tesla stock skyrocketed and marks the fastest rise ever to the top of the richest people list. When 2020 began, Musk was worth about $27 billion, barely cracking the top 50 richest people. Just 1 year later, his compensation package from Tesla, which is heavily tied to the share price, added more than $150 billion to his net worth. Next, the yield on the U.S. 10-year Treasury, which is the return that investors get on bond purchases, broke above 1% for the first time since March in overnight trading before Wednesday morning, when the results of the Georgia runoff election seemed clear, but before the chaos on Capitol Hill erupted. A 1% yield is a key psychological level. U.S. bonds are seen as safe places to park money, and yields move in the opposite direction of prices. So, when the price of a U.S. Treasury bond goes up, meaning that there's higher demand for a lower risk investment, then the yields go down. And that's exactly what happened in March. Everyone was terrified of the stock sell-off, so they tried to move money to safer places like bonds. The higher demand drove up the price, and the yield tumbled to a record low of just 0.318%. But this week, rates finally recovered above that 1% level. And finally, 40,000. The Bitcoin rally just keeps climbing. In the past 24 hours, the world's most popular cryptocurrency smashed through the $37,000, $38,000, $39,000, and $40,000 thresholds, hitting record high after record high. Over the past 12 months, Bitcoin has climbed a staggering 380%. These gains are part of a broader surge. The entire cryptocurrency market, including other coins like Ether and Tether, has surpassed $1 trillion, according to data from CoinMarketCap. Check out all our coverage on the crypto boom by heading to CNBC.com and downloading the CNBC app. That's it for After Hours. We'll be back here in our home office every Tuesday and Thursday, so be sure to catch us then.